Welcome to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace, calling North America to repentance and revival.
Welcome back to the Corner of Truth and Courage. This is Tom Wallace. This week is the week of the Passover. And of course, we Christians typically call it Easter. Easter has become the Christianized word that we use for the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Of course, Easter used to be a pagan holiday celebration, and early Christians tried to use the term to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The actual biblical word that is found in Acts chapter 14 is the word Passover, Pashka. And that's what we're talking about this week, the Passover. We're trying to look into things that you may not know about the Passover. Most of us are familiar with the story of Exodus chapter 12, as the Israelites had come to that final end of the 10th plague, and Pharaoh finally yielded, finally said, enough's enough. The death of his firstborn son was too grievous. The death of not just his son, but also every firstborn son in Egypt that did not put the blood on their doorpost, did not follow the command of God to take a lamb on the 10th day and prepare him on the 14th day in the evening to take its life and to eat of the lamb. And but prior to that, taking that blood and hyssop, they're dipping it in the blood and then putting it on the lintel and the doorpost. If they refused to do that, then the death angel would visit them that evening. Well, of course, Pharaoh's son perished and many other sons perished. But do you know what his name is? Do you know the name of the Pharaoh of Exodus that we're speaking of here? And so today we're going to kind of open that up to you there. Now, recently I was in Egypt, and it's really interesting to be in Egypt, in the land, or any of the Bible lands, and to read these passages. It just adds a new depth and warmth to the scriptures, to be in these lands and to read these scriptures, and it just really ministers and speaks to your heart. But how do we know who the king is? Well, some make the mistake think that it's Ramesses. Ramesses, of course, was a very famous king, but the time element, there's a lot of things that just don't fit right. And because it doesn't fit, there's a lot of critics, a lot of those who want to say, well, the Bible can't be true because of this, that, and the other. Probably one of the reasons why they make the mistake of Ramesses is found in Exodus chapter 12, where we read about the Passover. And it says in verse number 37, and the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men beside children. This is why we say there's maybe about 2 million people traveling. Why do we say 2 million? Well, if the men numbered at 600,000, if we got 600,000 men, then there's probably 600,000 women and children on top of that. So if you got husband and wife at now 1.2 million, so 600,000 men plus 600,000 women, we're now up to 1.2 million. And then adding their children in, average of 2 kids per family would not be unrealistic in an estimate. And so now you're adding another 1.2 million. So you're up to, maybe 2.4, 2.5, maybe million people leaving. And the Bible also tells us that there was a mixed multitude. There were others who went with them. Some of them might have been Arabs. Not Arabs, but Egyptians. Some of them might be of other nationalities that went with them as well. We just know it was a mixed multitude. But here we get the city of Ramesses is being mentioned. Now, the best that we can conclude, Ramesses is about 150 years later, King, the Pharaoh Ramesses, 1 and 2. And the city, Pi Ramesses, named after him. We're talking about 120, 150 years after the event. And why do they use Ramesses? Well, actually, the city was Avaris, that was the former name of the capital, but later became known as Ramesses. And of course, Moses is the writer of this, and he's not using the name Ramesses. We don't have the originals but the Masoretic text, a later hand used a dynamic equivalence, like we were just talking about with Easter and Pascha. A more popularly known name was Ramesses to the reader of days gone by. We make the mistake thinking it starts with Ramesses. So where do we start? Where do we get the date? Well, we got to start in 1 Kings chapter 6, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get through all this in today's broadcast. And by the way, if you miss any of our broadcasts, please go to our website, fortressoffaith.com. We're going to be posting an article on this so that you can see the timeline, see these names, and see the information and the evidence and lay that out. It's going to take me a week or two before we actually get that posted, but do check out our website, fortressoffaith.com, or .org. It's the same place. So where do we start? Well, we start actually in 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. This gives us a time frame, a time reference. In 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, we're told about Solomon. He's in his fourth year, and he starts to build the temple. And we know that date is 966. Now, for the sake of time, I can't get into the proof of why we know that date is accurate, but for now, please just accept. We know that date is accurate. And so, but that verse also tells us that this date, the fourth year of Solomon, is 480 years after the children of Israel leave Egypt after the first Passover. And so you take 966 and add 480 years to it. Of course, we're working in BC, before Christ. So we add numbers, and it moves us further away from our current time period. But it moves us to the year 1446 BC. 1446 BC. Now, the Bible also tells us in that same, just a few verses down, verse number 40, now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. So how do they get down to Egypt? Well, that starts with Joseph. Remember when he was sold into slavery by his brothers. And he becomes a hero, becomes second in command of Egypt, but he starts out as a slave. And this is 430 years earlier before they leave, after they are taken into slavery. Now, a key event, what changed? What made Joseph and his family from being a hero and his descendants being taken into slavery by the Egyptians? Well, that would have happened in the year 1550. In 1550, we have almost as the first. You need to know that the history of Egypt, they had two kingdoms, really. They had the upper kingdom, lower kingdom. And the upper kingdom defeated the lower kingdom. We had two pharaohs, each serving. Now we only have one after the year 1550. This brings us what we call the New Kingdom, or I sometimes call it the United Kingdom. And so this is when the children of Israel, children of Joseph and Jacob, were taken into slavery. And so let's move forward to the year of 1446. Who was on the throne then? Who was the Pharaoh? Well, his name is Amenhotep II, and he's on the throne at this time. Now, what's interesting is his gravesite when it was discovered. There's so much more we could talk about in this history of the pharaohs. It's a very interesting study. I might dive a little bit more into that tomorrow. We'll see. Let me quote a source. I need to get back to something there. Manetho is an Egyptian historian, priest, and a scholar, and his writings on the history of the Egyptian kings, he covered 31 dynasties. He lived during the 3rd century BC, and so he has access to the early records of Egypt, and he tells us it is Amenhotep who is the Pharaoh. So we have his source. There's another Greek scholar that writes about it there, and maybe a couple others that mention it. Josephus quotes Manetho as his source for saying Amenhotep as the Pharaoh. But what do we know about him? A couple interesting things. When his grave was found in 1898, Victor Loret, the French archaeologist, was the one who officially discovered and the writings about the tomb and all that. Now, when he got there, it was already plundered. All the treasures were taken, like many of the other tombs had already been plundered. But no one messed with the bodies. No one messed with the mummies that were there. But as you go in, as Victor Loret was describing his find in the discovery, they were pleased to find in the esophagus that down in the bottom, the king's coffin was still there. In the chamber to the side was a room where there were 3 other mummies. There were 2 adults, and in between them was a child. Now, all these people that are buried in Pharaoh's Amenhotep's pyramid or his burial chambers there had to have died before him. No one would have been buried after him. Only those who might have been buried before him. And so there were 2 adults and a child. Child is maybe between the age of 11, 12, maybe 13 years of age, maybe some estimate maybe as old as 15. But what's very interesting is that it was quite obvious this was the crown prince. How do we know he was the crown prince? Well, the crown prince would wear a hairstyle that only he and no one else would wear in the kingdom. It was known as the Horus lock. His head would be shaved, and a lock of hair that would be braided would come from the right side of his head. This was a common marking of the firstborn of Pharaoh, the firstborn male, signifying that he is the heir to the throne. There are many Egyptian pictures and statues of princes through antiquity that share this hairstyle. It's very common, very well known in the study of Egyptology. And we have his name. His name was there in the jars where they keep, their organs and all that kind of stuff. His name was Weben-Nusu, Weben-Senu. So this child, Weben-Senu, had died before Pharaoh. You say, well, how did they get his body? Did he not die in the Red Sea? Actually, the Bible does not tell us he died in the Red Sea. We know that Pharaoh was defeated in the Red Sea. His chariots and his horses went in, but we're never told that he went in. And even if he did, there were bodies of the Egyptians on the shore, and they would have retrieved his body. But tomorrow when we come back, I'll tell you something interesting about the body of Amenhotep, who was the king of Pharaoh. So join us tomorrow as we continue on things that you may not have known about Passover. So join us tomorrow at the corner of Truth and Courage. God bless you. Journey through history and prophecy in an unforgettable tour of the 7 churches of Revelation. Join me and my wife, Natalie, this November as we explore the ancient wonders of Istanbul, Ephesus, Laodicea, Smyrna, Philadelphia, Pergamus, Thyatira, and much more. Witness breathtaking biblical sights and experience the land where faith was tested and history was made. Spaces are limited. Go to our website, fortressoffaith.com, and reserve your spot today.